And one of the coolest things about AI is that it is forcing us to look at what consciousness is really for the first time in earnest. Really look at what consciousness is, because how can we know if a machine is conscious if we don't even know what it is for ourselves?
I'm Amy Woodall, and this is The Conscious Habit, a show from the People Forward Network. We're teaching you how to incorporate love and consciousness at work, at home, and the world at large. You just heard from Robin Rice. She's an internationally published author, a social change artist, and a mentor to leaders around the world. Her LinkedIn newsletter, y'all, it has almost 70,000 followers. It's called Conscious Leadership, and I also subscribe. I invite you to do the same. She applies her expertise on consciousness in the field of tech and AI in particular. So I was very excited to talk to her about that. How do we mold these two things together? And good news, she doesn't do it in a robots taking over the world way. You know what I think is interesting and what sets Robin apart is her own experience. She had this instantaneous awakening that allowed her to experience this dual awareness. And this process looks different for everybody. We talk a little bit about what it means to be human and how some people kind of strive for this awareness and how other people may have, like her, this instant kind of awakening. You know, it's an interesting conversation. I love how we're mixing in consciousness with tech. And you know where we're going to start? We're going to hear from Robin and how she defines consciousness. Conscious Habit listeners, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time with our guest, Robin Rice. I highly encourage you all to run out and find her on LinkedIn. Robin, before I even bring you in, I'm going to brag on you for a minute. Robin has a conscious leadership newsletter that has almost 70,000 followers, which means this woman knows a thing or two about consciousness. She is a guiding light in the world with some incredible wisdom. And where we're going to take our conversation today is a new place we've never gone before. And so I am so encouraged by this episode and encourage you all to listen with intent, because we're going to talk about that bridge between AI and consciousness. And we're going to go even deeper into some other areas that you may find interesting as well. Robin, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
I am honored to be here.
The question that we start every single episode with is, what does consciousness mean to you? I'm so excited to hear your definition.
Well, and I knew the question was coming, of course. It's asking about everything all at once, right? So it's a big question. My perspective is that consciousness is a capacity. It's more than just paying attention. It's a capacity for paying attention that awakens inside of you, is the best way that I can put it. You grow a capacity. Recently, I lost my sense of smell to COVID. Fascinating journey to not have smell in lots of different ways, right? It brought a new consciousness because I'd always had smell. So now I have this consciousness around smell that I'd never had before. And as it's returning, it's almost a different sense for me. So that leap in awareness that isn't even intended, but happens and grows in you, that to me would be what I would define it as, at least right now. I'd start there.
I love that definition, capacity for paying attention. It's almost like there's all of these compartments, right? And people operate from various levels of consciousness based on their own unique and personal experiences and the places where they're leaning in or they're leaning out. And I always love to hear what got you into this work, where leaning in and doing conscious leadership work, doing coaching, working in this space, what led you to this place?
So I had a sudden, instantaneous awakening experience when I was 35 years old. Actually, my 26th anniversary is tomorrow of waking up. And it came out of the blue. I had never heard of it. I grew up in a Midwestern town. I didn't have any alternate spirituality background at all. I mean, I knew Catholicism, Judaism, Christianity, and that was all I knew. Everything else was just strange and otherworldly. And then I had just gone through some really terrible times. I'd had a long history of terrible times, actually. And I was pretty broken, to be honest. I was really, really beyond an edge. And One day I asked a question. I was in a class and they were talking about psychic vampires or emotional vampires, I think is what it was. And I said, well, what's that? When people suck you dry, right? And the teacher said, well, if they suck you dry, you're not connected to the source. And instantly I was connected to the source. I traveled up out of my head into the universe. I saw everything that ever was and ever would be. I saw flashes of insight, the children I would have, the books I would write, the things that would be important in my life. I instantly said, took you long enough. I can't believe you let me sleep for 35 years. What were you thinking? And then I had to step back and ask myself, of course, all of this is going on while I'm just sitting in a chair. No one else knows this is happening. And I'd say, who are you talking to and what are you talking about? It was insane, this experience that was happening. And I have no idea how long it went on for in real time, maybe only seconds. I know I stayed upright in the chair. And when I finally came back, I had so many things happen in that journey. But then as I was floating back, I was like, and just so you know, I'm not going to be good. I'm not going to wear white. I'm not going to be a guru. I'm not going to wear long robes. Again, where does this coming from? I don't know. But I was very clear that I was not going to play some kind of game with this. And it came back to reality and everything in my life changed from that moment on. I was of dual awareness. So I still had my ordinary awareness as Robin, as I always had, but there was another awareness that was present and has never left since. I can wake up in the middle of the night. It's right there. It's always with me. And I couldn't find much information on people who had that experience. There were a lot of people. Eventually I went and studied everything I could study for years and looked at Eastern thought and looked at Zen and all the different traditions that were out there and tried to find something like what had happened to me. And I found some things, but it was very rare to find the description as a dual awareness. But that was what I had. So that's what I worked with.
Well, what an interesting, and I'm sure probably scary in the moment of being like, I don't know what this is. And I don't know if I have language around this, but also incredibly freeing. I'm sure a lot of emotions that went along with that. Back to sort of a definition piece, because I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on this. You have your specific experience of an awakening. How would you define an awakening? Is that like a smack upside the head and you're like a realization that none of this is real? How would you define awakening?
Again, the word I have to use is the capacity. So the capacity to be aware, to see all the things that were out there, to know things before they happen. For lack of a better term, and this is a terrible term, but read minds, if you will. Those kinds of gifts were just suddenly there. I just had an awareness. I think people who grow up in difficult situations, we all have sort of a sixth sense about when it's safe and when it's not safe and all of that. Just think of that on steroids. Suddenly, I could feel everything. I could feel good energy. I could feel bad energy. I could feel when I was safe, when I wasn't safe. I could just feel it really intensely. And it was accurate. As I tested it, it was accurate. Now, certainly there were times when I was off in la la land and wishful thinking and that sort of thing. But for the most, it was accurate. So I can only call it a capacity.
And it sounds like for you in that moment, your own consciousness was expanded to places you could have never imagined on your own. And so here's where my mind goes with this. There is the egoic mind, and then there is this higher consciousness, higher self. How did you figure out, or what was sort of your journey, or was it just a knowing of what was the difference between the two?
Well, I had a visceral understanding of it, but I didn't have any language for it. I didn't have any traditions for it. So I was confused, to say the least, on the egoic side. The other side was like, we're fine. We're good. This is who you are. This is who you've always been. This is who everyone is. Right? So it wasn't just me, I was special. It was like everyone is actually conscious. They're just not aware that they're conscious, which is kind of weird. But I understood it to not be particular to me, that this is what humans have as a capacity inside of us. And if you walk into a house and never turn on the lights, you'll never experience the lighted house. But somehow some light turned on inside of me. There could also be another 50,000 switches that haven't been turned on. I have no idea how much more there is, but I know that I went from a dark room to a lit room instantly. And you could just see more.
Well, I think that's a great way to describe it, is like the light switch was on. So it's like, oh, wow. And I had an experience not directly associated with yours, but I definitely had an experience where I had an instant remembering I was like, oh, right. That's right. I'm good. I'm whole. Oh, I forgot. Gosh, it was this instant remembering, almost like you went home and you were like, oh, right, this is how it is. So the journey to that for people can certainly be different. But I think along the path, what we're learning in our own space of awakening, our own experience of awakening is just back to the remembering. And again, it could be a long road. It can be an instantaneous road. It's very different for different people. And clearly it had such an impact on you. Did you immediately begin to follow this line of work? Did you immediately start to lean into sort of spiritual teaching? Did it take you a while? How did you get into the conscious leadership?
Oh, well, I mean, that was a long journey. Conscious leadership was a really long journey. I started searching for what had happened. And some people searched to have it happen. I was searching for what had happened. So I read everything I could find. I took workshops. They didn't really satisfy. Everything felt like it was interesting, but limited. Most of the people who were teaching them, those were just sort of people around that I could find, they were all sort of envious of my experience and couldn't really add anything to it. So I ended up being sort of the teacher as I was going along these things, just showing what I already had been experiencing. And so the teacher in me just naturally happened. It wasn't like I sought out to be a teacher. In fact, I didn't want to be a teacher. I had that same resistance as when I woke up, like, I'm not going to be good. But it sort of naturally happened. And then it became my career. I was already a storyteller and a writer. So shamanism is sort of an intermediary between pure consciousness and ordinary reality. There's the in-between worlds, if you will. And I like to say that consciousness is dropping the story. Shamanism is healing the story. So you can then drop it, because it's really hard to drop a broken story, the stories in us that are still really hurting. So shamanism, I tuned in and I said, is this the right path for me? And I was told for a time it will be the right path. And so I ended up writing books of shamanic fiction and started teaching. People wanted to do things with me after I'd written the books and they'd read them. And it all just sort of ended up becoming a career, if you will. And then one day it was gone. One day it was very clear it was done. I was not to be in that realm anymore. I was kicked out, actually, of that realm, much to my amazement and dismay. And it was like, no, now you have to go straight into consciousness and work in consciousness directly.
So you've followed the path with your intuition and your own consciousness of what's the right next step for me. And by the way, I have had some really powerful experiences with shaman and shamanism. We just got back, myself and a partner. We co-host this retreat for women every year. It's called the High Vibe Tribe Retreat. And it's high vibes only. We have one rule on our retreat: no assholes. That is the only rule. It's for women only, but you just can't be an asshole. And we had a very powerful group, shamanic healing with breath work. And I love how you described it. It's like the bridge between the spiritual connection and the healing and also the human experience, and very powerful, just space to hold for people. So then you moved into doing work in the world and have been coaching various leaders. And I know there's NDAs that are out there. And so we can't speak openly about a lot of that, but you found yourself working and consulting in this world of AI. And I am so intrigued by that bridge between AI and human consciousness. What are your thoughts on AI? The fear people have, the ego that comes in, the what do we do with it, the how does it help us, all of that stuff.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm not a coach. Coaching is a very specific thing, and I talk way too much to be a coach. And I like to be specific about it because I think coaching is a really valuable profession, and you are there to help a person find their own truth. People usually came to me and they wanted more than their own truth. They wanted the truth that I had seen through consciousness. So I bring my magic. I bring my toolkit. I bring all of my things when I work with someone, and I go very, very deep. And these are people who are impacting our world today in a very big way. So I'm working at the senior levels, and they already know. They may not know exactly what they want from my consciousness, but they know that consciousness is part of it. So they're already in some way on that path. And so years ago, I can't even think of how many years ago it was now, maybe 8, 10. I heard the word AI and I said, oh, wait, that's going to be important. someday. And so I actually moved myself to California, to Silicon Valley, to start working specifically with people who are in AI. And so that's been quite a while now. I've been more than 5 years in one situation and in a few others. So what I see is happening, we're going to need a greater consciousness to keep up with the world to come. We are going to be blasted in so many directions, bad, good, all of it's going to come out. And we're just going to take all of these leaps. And we genuinely do not know what those leaps exactly are going to look like, or how it's going to affect us, or what's going to change here when this changes there. There's no way to know. No one knows. No one knows what the effect is going to be yet. It doesn't matter how far along you are on actually building your AI. You don't know how it's going to affect humanity yet. Nobody knows. So we're afraid. Yeah, we're afraid of anything we don't think we can control and understand, nail down, and all that sort of thing. Especially in my experience being an American, in our culture, we really don't like not being in control. I live in Portugal now, so I'm noticing the difference a lot. But AI is like going from the horse and buggy to the train, to the car, to the airplane in a few years. And who's going to own the planes? And who's going to drive them? And is the plane going to drive itself? Is it going to be something even more than an airplane? Drones and jetpacks and all of these things are sort of our first initial ideas about it. But what happens when that actually is your everyday experience? And what happens to you inside? How conscious are you, and how able are you to be in awareness of what is good for you and not good for you? I mean, even that's one thing. If you could grow your capacity to say yes or no or wait, it's a huge skill that needs to be internal, because you're not going to be able to sift through all the information, and you're not going to be able to know where something's going to go. I know you have lots of questions, but that's a start.
Maybe we just start with the US, but it could be true everywhere. Do you find that with the access to so much information, and AI aside at the moment, because that's going to broaden the scope even more, we can talk about some of those things on the horizon, but do you think people have learned to trust themselves less because there is so much information? And so when you're sort of saying getting into that internally and kind of your inner knowing of what's good for you, do you feel like we've lost a pulse on that, given that Google is just a little click away, or there's always something that can give us an answer outside of ourselves?
I haven't thought about it in exactly those terms before. I do believe that we have less of a need to know everything, because everybody now can know everything. Back 20, 40 years ago, you'd always have the archetype of the know-it-all. And there's less of that now, because no one can know it all. There's no way. I think it's really interesting. What if there is a quantum leap, not in more information, but in not needing information, because it's already done. It's already there. Information is no longer the currency that we're living with. That would be fascinating to me, because consciousness is not information. Consciousness is awareness, and it processes information, and information is a piece of that. But we're not becoming more conscious to have more information. But that's an interesting mental shift.
What I have felt really like, I'm touching my solar plexus. For those of you who are like, she's touching her what? It's a little space above your belly button, but I'm kind of holding on to my stomach because I feel it in my gut. AI is going to, and already has in some ways, but I think it's going to continue to increase. It's going to make knowledge a commodity. Anybody can have access to it. So for those of us in our ego who has felt like my worthiness hinges upon being the smartest person, AKA the know-it-all, as you mentioned, or I need to gather more, I need to have more information, that's going to become less and less impressive, and sort of like less and less necessary, to your point. But wisdom cannot be manufactured, at least not in a way that we know it now. Wisdom is a different plane of consciousness. It's a different capacity, right, that we're able to download. And maybe the beauty is when we get rid of the mental real estate of all of the knowing that we're carrying around and the feeling like we have to carry that around, when we can release that because it's already done, as you mentioned, then maybe we create more space to be more conscious and tap into those places. What is some of the AI technology that may be coming out that you find the most fascinating, that it may really like, boom, open things up for us pretty quickly?
Well, again, I'm under NDA, so I can't talk about anything that's specific to the work that I'm involved in anyway. But I did hear about something that I think is a great example, and that is decoding animals' language, being able to listen to barks and listen to all the different animals, the ocean animals, all of that, and start to use AI to decode patterns, which is, language is a pattern. And so decoding patterns is something AI is great at and can do very quickly. So could we start to see situations where we actually can have a better understanding of the animal kingdom? That'd be amazing. I think that would be absolutely fascinating. I know there are people working on it, so I think that one's cool.
Well, and the ripple effect, I think it'll be humbling to humans, and we might need a little humbling because we have been top of the food chain for a long time. And to know that we aren't the only beings with some stream of consciousness that's coming through, being able to crack that code, like it shifts how big we often feel. And I think there can be something cool about feeling small, just knowing that there is life on other planets or some of those things that are being released in trillions upon trillions of galaxies. And that expands this level of consciousness of what I believe to be true: go to work, come home, pay bills, fold laundry. What I know to be true in my entire world, it's such a small piece. I'm not saying it's not rich and it's not important, but it's such a small piece of really the expansiveness of our own consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great example. So the person who lives in the city among 10 different nationalities on their block is going to have a very different capacity for human awareness than a person who lives with people just like them in their small town. It's just a fact. It's not anything against a small town. I think they're beautiful, but it's just different. You have a different awareness, and we're kind of becoming one world really soon. One of the really interesting questions, though, is will machines think for themselves, or will they become conscious? And one of the coolest things about AI is that it is forcing us to look at what consciousness is really for the first time in earnest. Really look at what consciousness is, because how can we know if a machine is conscious if we don't even know what it is for ourselves? So now this idea that a machine could be conscious, in my own consciousness experience, I don't see any reason why consciousness can't enter a machine that is made of bits and bobbles and all kinds of things in the same way that it's entered this machine, which is of flesh and blood and muscle and brain stuff. I don't see any reason why it couldn't. And that's what really scares people, because now we are not going to be top of the food chain, and they might see that we humans have done a pretty bad job. And that would be arguable, yeah, we might have done a really bad job. So what happens when someone smarter than us decides, or something smarter than us decides, yeah, we could just let those humans go?
People are like, that sounds like a great sci-fi movie, but you never know where the reality of life could take us. Nothing bands people together like a crisis. You want to see the human race come together quickly. You just see something else beyond the human race that begins to turn. And I'm telling you, there will be an immediate, who cares about the religion and politics we've all been fighting about? Race, religion, politics, gender. We will all be like team humanity if and when there is something else that could overtake us.
That's right. And it sounds sci-fi, but I can tell you, for those who are in AI, they're not treating it as sci-fi anymore.
It's that level of consciousness that you mentioned. People who are outside of it probably are like, I can't even fathom that. That doesn't even sound real. But the people who are in it are saying, we have a different lens of capabilities and where this could go down the pike. It's so fascinating. Like you mentioned, how quickly the world is changing. I loved that analogy of basically like all of this innovation we've done over the last couple hundred years. It's happening in 1 year, 18 months, 2 years. It's happening so quickly. And what a gift in many ways. And it's okay to be scared too. The other part is like being human means we have the experience of all of the emotions, and it's just part of the gig. We control far less than we give ourselves credit for.
Oh, so much less. Even in our own little world, we don't control nearly as much as we wish we did.
So what advice do you give to people out here? Our listeners oftentimes are leaders, and often leaders by mindset. It doesn't even have to be leaders by title, but they're out in the world. They're looking to be more conscious humans on the planet, but also more conscious in the workplace. What are some things that you recommend that they do or look into or experiences to help expand and broaden their own consciousness?
Well, it depends on, are you looking for a little or a lot? If you're looking for a lot, the only thing on the menu is really psychedelics. And that's a big conversation and it's a nuanced one. And I'm happy to go into that if you're interested. But psychedelics are giving us a capacity for expanded awareness in a specific experience that then we can integrate and have those. And it actually does move consciousness along if done well, if done in the right set and setting, all of those kinds of things. But I do believe that there's leaps to be had there. And if you want small change, then just pay more attention.
There you go. The small thing is pay more attention, maybe meditate, breathe, be more conscious. I'm like picturing the menu of consciousness in front of me, like, what do I want to have? Do I want an appetizer?
Then the middle is going to be a Zen retreat, or it's going to be a Vipassana retreat for 10 days where you don't talk. This is your mid-level. But yeah, you want to really take the jump. We now know a lot about psychedelics and I have a lot of experience with it. So I'm both as a user, a participant, and always in a sacred way. And then also as a sitter for others.
Well, let's talk about that. And I'm sure there'll be a disclaimer in here somewhere that this isn't like medical advice. And we're not saying, hey, everybody, go out and score yourself some whatever is on the menu. But there is really fascinating research, both in therapy and how therapy is using this to help people overcome trauma, PTSD, anxiety, depression, various disorders, that it's very powerful there. And then there is person after person after person who has used this to help with their awakening. And Robin had a spontaneous awakening. I loved, by the way, earlier how you said many people research how to get it. And I had to research like, what happens now? And I was like, that's so true. So true. I have watched many documentaries because I'm fascinated by this as well. But if there is somebody who's leaning in, let's just start there. Like, what does the psychedelic experience offer for people? And on that menu, is there something that you're like, hey, here's a place to research or here's a place to start?
Yeah. So here's the disclaimer. In many places, it's illegal. In Portugal, it's decriminalized, so you won't get thrown in jail for it if you're just using it. It's still not cool to be a dealer, and I would never do that, just putting that out there. But you need to be ready. You need to be prepared. You need to have tested, solid medicine so that you know it's clean. I think you need someone to sit for you or someone to be aware that you're doing this so that you're safe. And then you need help integrating it because the world does change after. You have a different worldview after. And if you don't have people in your world who also have a different worldview, who have experienced certain things, it's very difficult to integrate. And so that integration can be a real problem. It is also possible to have, quote unquote, a bad journey. There's a lot to know about it. So I'm not just saying, hey, go out and do this tonight. But I also don't think that, this is my personal view. My personal view is we can't sit back and just let the pharmaceutical take over or let only physical medical medicine versus spiritual medicine be the only thing on the menu. Again, I've done most of the big ones, if not all the big ones. I'm always aware there might be one I don't even know about. The 5-MeO-DMT mimicked the experience I had when I woke up. And so the minute I had that, I was like, whoa, wait. So that means this happened inside my head. Why? Why did it happen inside of my head when I was 35 years old, sitting on a chair? It was a spiritual experience, not a chemical one. So I think if you want your mind blown and you want to see the nature of the universe as a whole, all of it, that's sort of the queen of them all. But there's lots of others that help in different ways. And again, the research is showing us how that is being helpful. I personally find that a therapeutic, meaning a healing use of MDMA is really, really powerful for just coming to terms with yourself. That remembering that you had, oh yeah, I remember now, I'm okay, is very often an experience that people have on MDMA. Not when they're out dancing, party drug. That's not the experience they have. But we feel so bad as humans. It's one of the most interesting things to me. Once you've done MDMA and you feel how good you can feel, all your serotonin is rushing through your body and you're just amazed. Everything is wonderful and beautiful and loving. It's awesome. It strikes you, wow, how unhappy we live in this world. And why? Why are we so constrained? Why are we so tight? Why do we have to control? Why don't we know about these medicines? That sort of thing. So I think MDMA is really powerful for that. and turning around when you're in this feeling of loving yourself and loving everyone and turning around and looking at yourself. And this whole idea of lack of self-worth and all of those things. I don't have any of that anymore. I have none of it. It's gone. I'm really sorry for everybody else who's still dealing with self-esteem, but I'm like, I know I'm cool and I know you're cool, right? It's not like I'm better. I'm just like, we're all cool. So there's so many things that these can help us with. Mushrooms are very spiritual. If you want to get in touch with your spirit, if you want to get in touch with all different parts of you, mushrooms, I think, are really super powerful. So each one has its different offering. And this should be a literacy that we have. It simply should be a literacy that we have as humans because we are suffering enormously right now.
And it's spiritual and mental suffering, right? And what's so fascinating about this psychedelic experience, and again, for the right person, at the right time, the right location, surrounded by the right people. And I love that you mentioned, I keep saying I love, and it's true. I love that you mentioned integration because it's difficult to have this experience that shows you a deeper truth that you have not known or you've forgotten about. And then to be like, oh, I am going to go to work and I'm pay my bills and fold the laundry and go to the soccer game and figuring out how do I blend the human experience with this incredible like spiritual connection that I just had. So integration is such an important part so that we feel like we can still be anchored as humans, but let go of all the suffering that does not serve us. And I think that's what I've heard from people who have been down this journey is that it's allowed them to see their suffering with love and kindness and empathy and compassion, and also realize that, okay, it no longer serves me, and to let go of the stories and to lean more into love. I don't know if I've shared this with you, Robin, but my motto is love. I put that shit on everything. It's kind of like hot sauce. I think if we could teach the world to love themselves, there is so much good that's going to happen because when we love ourselves, we have less expectation about how you need to behave and you've got to act like this. And when we love ourselves, we don't expect other people to replace and provide those pieces for us. So we have more to give. There's more okayness. And I think that people often are like, they think of it as being, oh, well, love, then nothing gets done. No, I actually think more gets done because there's less obstruction in the way. And there's more collaboration. So what a gift that you've had to be able to experience that and sit with people and lead people through that. Are there any websites or books or documentaries? Are there any resources that come to mind for you if somebody's like, okay, I'm curious, you've got me. Where do you recommend they start?
Well, I'm going to give you a different answer. There's all kinds of books out there. There's all kinds of things out there. Because I believe, and by the way, I think love is a spiritual experience. But the way I would suggest it is set your heart on finding out more and see how it comes to you. Because that's how you begin to have this greater awareness is when you're looking for things that aren't on the list and you're opening yourself to say, okay, where might this come from? Where might I find the right person to talk to? And you'll find that if you just open up and say, all right, I'm interested, dear universe, whatever, I'm interested. I think this might be good for me. Show me the way. Let the way reveal itself, something like that. I'm not suggesting that you pray or whatever. It doesn't have to be anything like religious wise at all. But just open yourself to greater awareness and say, I want to know more. And I guarantee you something will happen. Probably the next day. I mean, very soon.
Watch out for your Instagram ads. You're going to have a...
There you go. There you go. Well, that too. That too. And get off Instagram. Get off of the social media because right now it's the greatest drug we have. It's the bad drug. Media right now, it's here to sell you something. Everything is here to sell you something. And everything is like free. You can't really own it anyway. Once you get to a higher level of consciousness, it's really clear that you can't own anything. It's ridiculous to say that this is mine, but then the entire forest is mine as well. Everything is mine. Everything I see, everything I come in contact with is my experience in that moment, and I don't have to own it. So there is a lot of deconditioning that goes along with Robin. And, I like to say when I started out, it was probably 20% this greater capacity, whatever that awareness was, this second awareness, 20% of that and 80% Robin. And now it's, probably after 26 years, the other way around. I'm 80% in the greater consciousness, but God, Robin hangs on. I swear, she is a beast. And I even listen to her sometimes. I'm like, seriously, are you saying that again? How many years have you said that? How long have you thought about that? You are still there. Aren't you funny? And I just laugh at her, like, that's funny. That's really funny.
It's interesting to hear people, in their journey and how their relationship with that ego is what I refer to it as. I had a guest on over the summer, Laura Hyman, and she referred to it as the bitch in the attic. And I really loved that. But it's sort of like this progression where we think it's us for a long time, prior to whatever our awakening might look like. And again, it could be slow and steady or it could be spontaneous, but we think it's us. And then there's sort of this slow turning where we realize like, oh, those thoughts are meaningless. They actually don't mean anything. This is just old chatter. I don't have to listen to it. I am this higher consciousness. And then it almost is kind of like, at least in my experience, and I think maybe this is for the slow and steady, where there becomes a little battle in between. Like, no, you're not telling me what to do. A little bit like we're in that teenage rebellious stage. We get frustrated with the ego, like, who do you think you are telling me what to do? And, really angry. And then it kind of gets to this place where we can learn to see it with love and compassion. And we're like, you're so silly. Go take a seat. You then can get to a place where, yeah, you can just look at it and laugh and almost like it's this little child that you just kind of have to keep wrangled in. And I think that's an interesting path of the relationship, with the ego. I love that you call yours Robin. I call mine Jerry. And I think Jerry's a meth addict.
Robin is a really nice girl. I mean, I found that in one of my journeys. I just fell in love with Robin. I thought, oh my God, she's just awesome. She is so sweet. She's such a nice girl. I kept saying, she's such a nice girl. Not me, but it's such a nice girl. But I would actually say the more I've been diving into it, the more I don't really think of it in terms of ego anymore. I think of it in terms of my human biology, my chemistry, my neurobiology. I think it's the unconscious programming, all of that sort of thing that is coming out with ideas and opinions and fears and all that sort of thing. And I feel like it's what the machine does in all of us, because the stories are pretty much all the same. What we want, all those, they're pretty much all the same. I think it all just comes down to sex. I think the entire reason we're on the planet is to procreate. I'm not talking about the sexual act necessarily, but the drive to fit in, the drive to be safe, the drive to mate, the drive to procreate, all of that. And maybe that's just, I'm super in touch with my own core strivings when they don't seem like they're coming from my greater consciousness. They seem like, oh, well, that's interesting. That's there. Whether it be, seeing a gorgeous person walking down the street. And I mean, I'm 61 years old and I still go, that looks good. Like, where does that come from? That's not how I want to think about people, but there it is. It's still there. I've been playing more and more with getting to the deepest core I can find of myself that is not of this greater consciousness, and being like lots of compassion, lots of understanding, lots of, wow, you are still 2 years old here. But it's fun. It's a fun game for me anyway.
I love your journey of being more curious and digging in. And I like that, the biological hardwiring that's like, maybe not a flaw in the machine, but it's like how the machine was designed. This is just a part of the coding.
That's right. That's exactly right.
This is a part of the coding that's in there. And we just have to learn that like, that's this code. And that, but to realize that separation when we are in a state of love and openness and understanding and compassion and a feeling like we're connected to something bigger, that's a very personal journey, or even connected to each other, just feeling like this connection to humanity. We're tapped into that higher level of consciousness. And when we are in the need, the wanting, the shame, all of the lower level pieces, then we are defaulting to the hardwiring, the ego, the fill in the blank of what. But to realize the separation is there is leaning into a greater consciousness. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so. And look, as long as I'm going to have a human body, I'm going to have wiring. I mean, I'm never going to get the bottom of that. It's interesting and it's fun and it's nice to get rid of suffering, to be honest. But beyond that, it's like, I'm going to have it. This is what comes with this experience, but it is not all of who I am.
Ooh, I love that. It is not all of who I am. Robin, you've given us some really great insight to think about, and consciousness and psychedelics and your own experience. And I can't wait to just hear from listeners and what they're taking away and what questions they have for us. I'm curious, what is on your nightstand right now? Is there a certain book or podcast or something that you're reading that you're like, this really has my attention?
I don't read much anymore, to be honest. I don't listen to much anymore. I think what I do now, I have a handful of books here in Portugal after my huge library of many years. And I just pick one up and open something at random if I feel like I want to listen to something or have another insight.
What are one of those books that are always kind of near for you to grab?
Tao Te Ching is always going to be there. Manifesting Zen Insight. Daniel Katari, Daininkatagiri. He also wrote Returning to Silence. So those are a couple I'll give you.
I love having those around that are like your reference books where you're like, I just need a little something, just a little wisdom and probably wise.
I also have to say, it is folly to assume my awesomeness lies dormant, which is the paintings of the mincing mockingbird. Have fun with your books. Have fun with all of the things, I have to say. But it is folly to assume my awesomeness lies dormant.
What a great book title.
I know, isn't it?
Yeah. Robin, thank you. It has been a joy to connect with you. I encourage our listeners to go find you on LinkedIn. Is there any other place that you recommend listeners following Robin?
BeWhoYouAre.com, RobinRice.com.
Fantastic. We'll have all of that.
LinkedIn's the best place.
Yes. Follow the newsletter for sure.
This is great. Thank you.
Before we wrap up this episode, here are my 3 takeaways from Robin and how we can incorporate them into our lives. Number 1, consciousness is the capacity for paying attention. What a great reflection and simplification, I think, even of consciousness. How often are you putting your phone down, looking up from your computer, taking a deep breath and anchoring yourself in the present moment and just paying attention to others, to nature, to what you're experiencing within your body? If we can intentionally take time each day, once a day, 3 times a day, 5 times a day, to just pay attention, you are going to expand your own consciousness. Number 2, tap into your higher self's wisdom. Now, I'm going to share with you my own personal practice. I love to give a name to that little voice in the head. As Laura Hyman had described on a previous podcast, she called it the bitch in the attic. That voice in the head, when we give it a name, we can separate ourselves from that internal judger that's really there to protect us and our highest best self. And so when sort of thoughts come in that are maybe self-sabotaging or they're judging ourselves, judging other people, to just say, is that a me thought? Or is that a, whatever you've given this ego's name, I call mine Jerry. Is that a Jerry thought? Higher wisdom, it just feels true. We don't have to convince ourselves of it. And the more that we're operating from a place of consciousness, as in point number 1, the more we're paying attention, the faster we can access that higher wisdom. It's on a plane of vibrational communication where we're able to access that. Number 3, openness to experience broadens our awareness. How open are you? I was having this conversation with a coaching client earlier this week where I've had to have this tough love conversation with myself where I said, you got to stop being so damn certain. When we are certain and we dig our heels in, we block possibility to broaden our understanding or our awareness of ourselves or the world. There is a great book that I'll throw in here. It's called Think Again by Adam Grant. And I love this perspective of just how challenging our current narrative allows us to expand. And how often are you encouraging yourself to do that? It's okay to not always know everything and remain open. Thanks for listening to the Conscious Habit Podcast. If you dug this episode, we'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you're into this consciousness thing, if you like this conversation and you want to meet more like-minded people, head on over to Facebook and join the Conscious Habit community. Until next time, do the world a favor and go love yourself.